Welcome back to the training room, brought to you by Lionel University. A pretty cool place, if I do say so myself. You can check us out at lionel.edu. Joining me, as always, my great co-host, Dr. Aaron Nitschke. Dr. Aaron, are you excited for today's episode?
I am, John. Are you?
I am excited because of a couple things. I'm always excited to talk shop with people in the industry, but this is one where I can tell when I was coming up with some of the questions, I was like, I'm asking this one because I want to know the answers to these. That makes it always a little extra fun for me. And today we get to talk with someone who's really in the know when it comes to nutrition and maybe specifically performance nutrition. Aaron, is this something that you have some background in or some, I guess, experience with?
Definitely after 23 years in the industry, but it's also an area that I think most clients or individuals are confused about because of just the sheer volume of information that's out there around the topic that is more information than it is accurate in some ways. To have an expert with us to peel back some of those layers and tell us exactly what's what and what's evidence-based and what's not.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That's exactly why I asked the question. In my time as an educator, and I've taught basically like nutrition 101 undergrad.
Yes.
And when it comes to nutrition and questions coming out of left field, there's no other topic where I've gotten the most variety of questions than nutrition,
Same.
right? Like like after all these years, I'll still get questions where I'm like, okay, that's a brand new one for me. And to your point, it's because there's so much information out there, and we want to get down to the bottom of what's actually relevant and what's actually practical. Enough from us. I want to go ahead and introduce our guest today. Our guest today is the Lionel University Chief Academic Officer. Please correct me if I'm wrong in saying some of these titles. It's Dr. Nick Barringer. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, thank you, John. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk nutrition. And it's funny you say that, John, because that's one of the reasons I love my profession is for those left field questions. We'll travel a lot of times and give nutrition talks, and there's at least a question each session that I've never received before. And then I'll mark down in my list of things I need to research. So that's always fun.
Yeah, definitely. Nick, maybe we can start with this. I really want to make sure we shine a light on folks like you, people that are working with us here at Lionel. Can you give us and our listeners a little bit of an overview of who you are, your background, and how you became so focused on performance nutrition?
Yeah, I was interested in health and fitness at an early age, middle school, high school, probably a lot of the other Lionel staff, just passionate about it. Studied it in college at the University of Georgia, but then ended up going the route of the military and joining the military straight out of college. And so I spent 21 years in the military as a dietitian. And in that time, I was able to work with special operations. I was able to do research with warfighters, like how to fuel them best for combat scenarios. I was able to do research in a deployed environment. At the time, it was Afghanistan, and look at how special operators, they fuel themselves and what type of energy deficit they might be in those deployed environments. And from that, I was able to teach at West Point both kinesiology, which I have my doctorate in, and nutrition as well. And then I closed out my career as the program director for the Army Baylor Master's Program in Nutrition. And all that is a program through the military, accredited through Baylor University, where people come into the Army that want to be dietitians. So I was able to oversee that. And then I came here with Lionel. And in the meantime, I still work with clients, both in government and some professional and Olympic level athletes, along with people who just want to try to be fit.
Nice.
Amazing. I want to follow up on that because it's so fascinating that you're doing nutrition in the military. And now I'm not from the military. I'm a military brat. So I've heard stories from my dad and some of his friends back in the day. But as far as fueling soldiers, and that's the picture that's painted in my mind. Can you walk us through that a little bit? What's that? I imagine for anyone, we want to make sure that we've got enough fuel for what we do. And I sit here at my desk and work from home. But for soldiers, what's some of the thought process there?
Yeah.
The thought process evolved. And what was nice is while I was in the military, I got to see it evolve. So when I was in college, I thought I wanted to go the collegiate sport route. So I got to see what that looked like at a high level and how they fueled, et cetera. And then I got to the military, and the military was behind. They weren't really applying those fueling strategies. Our exercise was all like calisthenic based. It was push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run. And so what was really neat is while I was there, I got to see that evolve and be part of that. So a program that got stood up while I was there was the Ranger Athlete Warrior program, where basically all we did is say, let's take what you're seeing at the Division I collegiate athletic programs, the professional athletic programs, the Olympic programs, and treat soldiers just like that. And so a lot of it was going over nutrition, basic nutrition principles, working with the dining facilities where those soldiers eat at. So we made a little choice architecture. And all that means is we put the good stuff that we wanted them to eat up at the front of the dining facility, and then put the stuff we don't want them to eat much of at the back of the dining facility. So you naturally choose the healthier options because they're placed there in front of you. We talked a lot about recovery and when to fuel, like after big training events, and then supplementation education, because there is a Wild West, especially at that time, where people were just ordering stuff offline. You could get about anything. And so educating them what's both appropriate and what's safe and is not going to hurt them. So that was a mix of what I did on the ground as a dietitian.
That's amazing. And I would imagine a unique challenge, because when you think about working with individuals on nutrition, it's like the general population, but this is like a very niche population with specific demands and specific needs. And I'm wondering, were there specific or odd, maybe nutrient deficiencies that you saw in that population that are unique to that population versus like mainstream American diet individuals?
No, I mean, that's a great question, Aaron. But honestly, what sometimes people forget is the military is just a reflection of society. So just like there's weight issues in society, those are going to be reflected in the military population. Yeah. Before I worked in special operations, there was a lot of soldiers I worked with who were over fat. And so we needed to help them lose weight to maintain that standard. Nutrition deficiencies, really rare, especially given the food supply we have is pretty good, pretty strong. So I never saw any true nutrition deficiencies in my time there. It's much society today is more kind of a overabundance of easy calories in some settings.
Yeah, absolutely not fueling appropriately to meet the demands being placed on the body. Yeah.
So before we start to talk about some of the fundamentals of performance nutrition, let's just define it. What does that mean for you when we're saying performance nutrition?
Performance nutrition is just fueling for whatever task you have in front of you that you're trying to accomplish, that you want to perform your best at. And that has really expanded, even in my mind, since leaving the military. Because at one time when I was in college, I thought that was for athletics. And then I get in the military and I realize, okay, this is for soldiers. Now, post-military, I'm working with executives who they're just trying to be as cognitively sharp and make those great decisions. So there really is performance nutrition is across the spectrum of a lot of different activities and even points in individuals' life cycle. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, and interestingly, when I've had nutrition conversations with people over time, and they hear things like performance nutrition or nutrition for soldiers and that sort of thing, they start to paint this picture in their head that they must be eating these soldier foods or these professional athlete foods that are not accessible to the rest of us. And that's not really the case, is it?
No, trust me. The food soldiers eat are very accessible to because there's something called a BDFA, and all that is a basic daily food allowance. And so to feed every soldier, I think on average, like last time I checked, I mean, it's $12 to $15 a day. It's not that much. Now there's the economy of scale, et cetera, but it's not like there's any secret food ingredients. It's the same chicken, the same steak, the same fish, the vegetables and all that are available to most individuals, right? Now, there is the meals ready to eat, which is interesting. There are these packaged foods that don't require refrigerations that you can throw in a pack when you go out to the field or when you go into a combat zone. And I think those things are truly a feat of science. Like I am a big fan of the meals ready to eat because of what they're able to do, the nutrition they're able to provide in that stability, whether it's hot or whether it's cold, is quite impressive and a very unique capability that we have in the United States military. If you look on YouTube, you'll see people eating MREs and give certain reviews, or you might hear soldiers talk about them in a negative light. But what I always tell them is, look, if you're trying to expect that MRE to taste like your mom's cooking or like a restaurant, you need to lower those expectations. To talk about something, again, you can throw in your back and you can go into the desert where it's 110 degrees and it can be exposed to that, and you can break it out and you can eat it and it's not going to make you sick and it's still going to fuel you. That's pretty cool without refrigeration.
Yeah, like the purpose of those is not for enjoyability. It's more like a purpose to fuel and ensure that you're still going to get nutrients and macros on board to accomplish the task at hand. This isn't about a 5-course,
right.
Michelin star.
You're exactly right, Aaron. But I will say, and defend it in this light, is that even though it is a fueling strategy, they do test for palatability and they test flavor, and they do have independent individuals rate it and grade it. And then they'll take the actual prototype and take it to the field and have service members eat it and rate them, and they pick the higher rated items. So you do care about flavor, because one of the things I learned early on, and I'll give this, and maybe we can link this study in the show notes. This is pretty fascinating. There was a study that at the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, they did with the Norwegian military in the cold. You burn a lot of calories in the cold. I don't know if you guys know that. Cold physiology, you're burning a lot of calories. You're wearing extra stuff, you're carrying extra equipment, moving in the snow is not very efficient, all that. So these soldiers were burning all these calories more so than they were getting in the meals they were provided. A colleague of mine, who's also a buddy who was head of the study, was like, man, I got this figured out. I'm going to just give them extra supplemental rations to close that caloric gap, which would make sense. I think we all, if we brief that plan, yeah, that's perfect. Gives it to them, repeats the trial. Come to find out, they just ate all the snacks and then just didn't eat any of the meals.
Oh, geez.
And so to your point of palatability or flavor, Aaron, that's also another important consideration is a meal provided isn't always a meal that's consumed. And so you do have to either educate and find ways to encourage that caloric consumption, or you got to give people something very palatable that they want to eat.
Yeah.
So we've established your view on what performance nutrition is. And for our listeners, I think that prefaces things pretty well, because it's not like this non-accessible form of nutrition. It's just a little bit of knowledge, and some application can go a long ways. If you had to narrow things down to maybe 3 to 5 fundamentals of performance nutrition, what are the top 3 to 5 that you say move the needle the best?
Yes. Starting off, as we all have probably got our hydration beverage, hydration, because I look at it in the framework of what's going to hit you quickly. And hydration is going to affect thermoregulation. It's going to affect performance. It's going to impact your heart rate, right? If you're dehydrated, doing exercise, heart rate's got to raise, all those sort of factors. So just making sure you are adequately hydrated. And I start off with half your body weight in ounces, just as a goal. And then based off that, your activity, other things, there's other ways to track hydration. For those listening, it's about to get hot. If you're a hot environment, if you're in Arizona, if you're in Houston, like where I'm at, or other areas, and you go out on a run, I always recommend people start weighing themselves before and after, so you can capture your sweat rate. So you know, okay, this is how much fluid I need to drink. A simple scale. I've done this with a lot of different athletes. It works really well. Yeah, you can use urine specific gravity, other things, but that works. So that's principle 1 is hydration. The second principle is just getting the basics of, I like color on my plate. Mm-hmm. If you ever look at your plate and your plate's completely beige or brown, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Every time, like I can tell you, like without these rules. So I try to get, hey, let's get at least 3 colors on our plate. Let's get a red, a green, maybe a blue, and rotate that in. Why? Because those different colors mean different nutrients, right? It also means different phytonutrients, anthocyanins, all those other factors. Now, I will say this because my kids have tried this on me. Fruit Loops don't count.
Or Lucky Charms, or
Lucky Charms. You get to stay a step ahead of them. Anybody with young kids knows. So fruits, vegetables. And then the other piece of it, and I'll put it like twofold, is one, making sure you're hitting your protein goals, which were just raised with the new food dietary guidelines, 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And then if you're an athlete, a principle that really can sometimes get neglected is don't forget about carbohydrates. Yeah. And there's a big spectrum, and there's probably carbohydrates are probably the most misunderstood, I would say, of all the macronutrients. Because like you think about protein, you'll be listening to this, like protein, I just said 1.2 to 1.6, like That's like a 0.4 gram swing, or you might even see 1.2 to 2, so a 0.8 gram swing. You look at carbohydrates, you'll get recommendations anywhere from 4 grams per kilogram of body weight all the way to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. Mm-hmm. That's a huge swing. And so I think that's where the confusion is. And all that is, I always ask people in my class really quick, who here runs marathons or ultra marathons? If I don't see any hands raised, I'm like, all right, nobody has any business going above 8 grams per kilogram of body. Like that's the end of that spectrum. So most people listen to this, if you're an athlete, 6 to 8 would be where you hit, but make sure you're getting those carbohydrates, especially if you find that you're fatigued, you're under recovered, you're not hitting those marks or those times that you want to hit. A lot of times I go back and I look and it's they're underfueling carbohydrates.
Got it. So to me, that sounded like a lot of the basics, right?
Very basic.
Some of the things you've hit on today so far are sleep, getting plenty of colors on your plate, hydration, protein and carbohydrate intake. So it sounds like in terms of performance, becoming masterful at the basics is a huge step toward ensuring that high level of performance. Does that sum it up pretty well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you do the basics well, if you nail the basics with high performance athletes that I've worked with, like they all have that down. That's the differentiator. They're willing to do the same thing day in and day out.
Right.
They live boring lives, honestly. Or some might consider it in terms of that variation, but they're very focused because they have that goal in mind.
Right. It's just like with exercise, like it doesn't have to be fancy. The basics still work, but we tend to overcomplicate strategy in the name of it being trendy or fancy or, oh, it's going to move the needle, but really getting masterful at the basics is where we all really need to be.
Yes. Have you guys talked to our dear chancellor?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you guys talked to him about exercise, but Martin and I, we've had this conversation a lot of times. It's like, you look at somebody like him who's trained some of the fastest people in the NFL, his resume, right? Look at all the people he's trained. And if you've trained with him, he doesn't do anything. Like Martin doesn't do any secret exercises. He said so on his podcast. I don't know, but I'm saying like, he does the basics better than anybody else. And that's in terms of coaching them. That's what I witnessed and that's what I saw. And so that's the difference.
Yeah. So I want to take the same topic and move it over to the world of personal training. And I know that's been a big part of my world and Aaron's world. And you've been working with, I guess, different populations than us, but you've definitely dipped your toes in working with everyday clients. In terms of your average everyday trainer, are they overcomplicating this whole nutrition thing when they're talking to their clients? Because to me, you're making it sound like mastering the basics is really where it's at. Do you feel like trainers are overcomplicating things?
Definitely. If Instagram's any reflection, there are definitely some. And I get it because maybe you're trying to sell that your services are better or have some sort of differentiator. I would challenge that the differentiator be the relationship you have with the client and the basic nutrition principles. If you can, again, get them to educate those principles consistently, you're going to see results. They're going to see results.
A follow-up to that, Nick, just because obviously like certified health and fitness professionals have this very unique and specific scope of practice that doesn't include medical nutrition therapy, meal planning, like all of those things. And I find in my experience mentoring newer trainers, newer professionals, they're almost too afraid to have the nutrition conversation. And so they just avoid it altogether, or they don't feel like they're empowered enough to help educate on those basics. Here's what a balanced plate looks like. Here's where these types of nutrients come from. This is the role carbohydrates play in the body. Like, what advice from an RD's perspective would you give to like our students, our health and exercise professionals about overcoming that fear of having that nutrition conversation and the role that they can uniquely play?
I think one, know your state laws because they are different and you have different within that. But then two, don't be afraid, be empowered. What's going to empower you is education, like nutrition courses we offer at Lionel, et cetera. Get the education. And then if you're doing basic nutrition stuff, that's well within your scope and not getting to medical nutrition therapy. And I might be a little different as far as a dietitian because I am not overly protective of because I have this dietitian credential that I think everybody shouldn't speak. I think there's enough health issues in the world. I want every personal trainer, I want every athletic trainer, I want every physical therapist, whatever, talk about nutrition, right? There's plenty of business to go around. I certainly think just giving basic nutrition advice to those individuals that's scientifically valid is key, especially if you look at the research and you're trying to get these people to lose weight and you're not addressing nutrition, statistically speaking, you're probably not going to have results.
No,
Because it is so hard to outwork excess calories. Like, just think about this. Everybody think about this. Close your eyes if you're listening to this. Think about last time you were in the gym. How long did it take you to burn 300 calories? Like on a machine?
Yeah.
Now go to the vending machine or go to a 7-Eleven and look at that 300 calorie like protein bar or whatever. How long did it take you to eat that? That's why you're never going to overcome that with exercise alone. You have to address both.
Yeah. And I think individuals forget that exercise does not burn a lot of calories.
No.
Like, you look at basal metabolic rate making up the majority of what it takes to allow the body to run for respiration, digestion, sleep, recovery, all those things. Exercise is like this really small component, and then there's NEAT movement. So just moving the needle with exercise alone is an ineffective long-term solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our listeners, they're hearing some of this. Some of them might be like, oh, great. He's telling me to drink water, monitor my protein, my carbs, eat some fruits and vegetables. And they're looking for like the big, cool thing. So there are some great, cool, emerging, cutting edge topics in the world of nutrition and performance nutrition. So let's shift over there, because I want to make sure our listeners understand that we're paying attention to that too. We just want to make sure that we emphasize that the basics are so important. They have to be there before we start worrying about a lot of these more cutting edge things. So in the world of performance nutrition, what are you seeing out there that's really relevant for our listeners in terms of cutting edge or emerging topics?
I think emerging topic that's been going on for quite some time is the gut microbiome, right? And how the bacteria in your gut impacts the rest of your body, whether that's exercise performance or health, depression, these other factors. And so that kind of goes back to some of the things we talk about. We talk about fruits and vegetables, we talk about fiber intake. Protein intake is low, can be low in a lot of the population. But if you look at statistically speaking, most people, I think it's over 40% aren't getting enough fiber in their diet.
Yeah.
So that doesn't get talked about a lot. And so finding ways to get fiber in the diet are both going to help with weight loss, but also health, performance. So finding ways to either sneak that in, or sometimes it might be to get a person over the edge. Maybe it is a basic fiber supplement. So I would say the gut microbiome is something that if you're not reading about or understanding, I would dive into that and look at that. And then if you're a personal trainer that works with like athletes, there was a study with Boston marathoners that I always found really interesting by this group coming out, where they looked at the fastest runners versus the slowest runners. And they looked at their poop, and in their poop, they found this bug that was much different. It was called Veillonella. And they had much higher composition of Veillonella in the faster runners. So this bacteria. And so what they found it did, it took the lactate that was produced while they ran and quickly converted it to short chain fatty acids, which can be used as a fuel source. So what's cool about this type of research is now it begs the question, or looks at, could I give you Veillonella and improve your 5K time? Right. So there's a lot more like research out there about, okay, what does the gut of these high performance athletes look like compared to the average person? And then what are those differences? And then can we change those in the gut of the normal person to make them more like the elite? And will that impact performance? So that's the next area that I'm really excited about and following closely.
That is really interesting. On one hand, I'm really glad I wasn't part of that study. I was not one of those researchers, but phenomenal information to like really start digging into what does that gut look like in people who are doing X, Y, and Z versus people that are doing this over here. And what can we learn from this population to improve performance over here, I think is incredibly fascinating.
So with a lot of this stuff, with nutrition information in general, I think the general public, they'll hear things like magnesium's good, so you should take it, or most people need some vitamin D, but you don't truly know unless you measure these things. And I know that there's a lot of different options out there. Blood work is certainly an option that can help to define this for you. I did that for myself at one point, and I found that the one thing I was truly deficient in was vitamin D, which I was surprised. And so I've started supplementing a lot more with vitamin D in the last few years. So so please speak on that a little bit, just being able to measure these things and maybe using blood work as a way to figure out what you truly need to shore up your nutrition.
Yes, no, thanks for that, John. Blood work is the future, and it's only going to get more pervasive. At one point, as a practitioner, I would have to be in a medical setting. I would have to go to a physician or physician assistant, nurse practitioner, whatever, and ask for those labs for that patient. Certain hospitals, the dietitian can order their own labs or that are nutritional based, but there was a little bit of a rigmarole to even get those labs. Now the end user is empowered a lot more because there's so many companies offering blood value testing, whether that be Inside Tracker. Whoop now offers it, or is going to start offering it along with the wearable data. And so what that means for the trainers is you have an opportunity to leverage blood work and not have to go the medical route, but more the performance route. Now, I do want to go back to, we talked about medical nutrition therapy and scope of practice. With a lot of this blood work that you're leveraging, it is not for the trainer to say to the individual they're diabetic or not, or any type of disease state. A lot of how these are built it's for performance based, like with you, John. Okay, let's get your vitamin D up to optimal levels. Let's get your red blood cells to this level because you're running a marathon, etc. But if something were out of whack or out of value, for instance, if your A1C came back and it's a 7, which is a long-term measure of blood glucose for those listening, it wouldn't be me as a trainer to tell John he has diabetes, right? I would see that and be like, hey, you need to do a follow-up with your provider. And then that would be for them based off that lab value. But what's also even cool about that process right there is you might have just saved that individual or your client some sort of medical emergency down the road. You might have caught something early. Because for all those reasons, I just find it so powerful. And the clients I work with, so I use blood work in my practice, they love it, right? Because now we have objective data that we can leverage along the process that, okay, if you eat this way, your blood markers will actually move this way. Yeah. And they can see that, they can feel it versus just a number on the scale or mood, et cetera. And for those listening, we do offer blood work courses at Lionel. We leverage Vitality Blueprint, which is Dr. Andy Galpin. Everybody listens to his podcast, and a guy named Dan Garner developed that from work with their kind of elite athlete. And so basically we're just teaching the students how to interpret that lab value work at the basic level to coach performance to their clients. And I think it can be a very beneficial for the clients, but then it can also be another revenue stream for that trainer or for that gym.
Yeah, you had a really powerful point there, because I experienced this is we might be the ones that kind of nudge our clients to go see the doctor. Yes. And I've had the experience many times where I did that, and then they said, oh, okay, yeah, my family's been saying this, people have been telling me, but they weren't listening to their family. They weren't listening to their close friends. But when finally someone who was a little bit removed from that as their personal trainer was saying it to them, now they finally did it. And I think that's a big part of how we should view ourselves as personal trainers, as sometimes we're their health assistant in terms of giving them a little nudge to take care of business when it comes to getting themselves checked out by the doctor.
Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, even like leveraging the wearables, if you can get your client's wearable information and interpret that is huge. I had a client, based on his sleep data, I knew something was off, and he had sleep apnea. I figured, again, it wasn't me for to diagnose it. I was just like, hey, go to your doctor and ask for a sleep study. And sure enough, we caught sleep apnea from his wearable. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can think as health and exercise professionals, we might be the first line of defense for clients, especially because we know that there are barriers for clients going to their primary care provider. There's this sense of fear, or there's this sense of cost, and it's a chore, and they're going to weigh me and do all these things. But we can have real coaching conversations, and we might be the first people to see the data, and data tells a story, and it's up to us to interpret all of those metrics in a way that It gives them information about what their story is saying and what stories might need intervention or addressing of certain components to improve whatever those metrics might be.
This doesn't fall under the, at least I don't think it falls under the umbrella of nutrition, but I wanted to get your quick take on this because it's everywhere now, and it's the topic of peptides. Because it's becoming a part of our world, whether we like it or not. So I think we need to know about it. And it does seem to fall under the umbrella of health and wellness. And Dr. Nick, I've got 50-year-old hips over here. Maybe you can help me out with a little bit of peptide knowledge.
I think it's very interesting. I think the compounds, probably the one for the hips everybody would think of is the BPC 157. And it's certainly in the news, but I would caution everybody to realize that as of right now, as of to date, I think there's been one human study in Europe on BPC 157. There's been no human studies in the States. And a lot of the other compounds, they're all animal study based.
Right.
So that's one. And so then two, because of that, all these things you're seeing, if you look at any like peptides being advertised, it says for research purposes only.
Right.
I don't want to be a lab rat. And so as of right now, until the research change, and it very well might, like a year from now, it might be everybody's doing it and acknowledging it. But as of right now, I would recommend to people to hold off and keep that curiosity, but wait until more testing and trials have done just to ensure that it's safe. Because like with anything, I heard a quote, and it might have been from Andy Galpin, given the line, there's no free rides in physiology. If something, just like with growth hormone or whatever, if it's making your muscles grow and your bones grow, it can make other things grow, tumors, etc. So just taking that caution along with it is, I would say with these peptides, is let's be cautious. There's other levers that we can pull on in terms of nutrition, sleep, all these other factors. I would say pull hard on those and wait before you dive into the peptides until they're approved for human use.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern with them, Nick, is we don't have enough of the story. And how animal physiology translates to human phys is very different. And we've seen that in other research cases over the years. And so we don't have the long-term longitudinal data to tell us these are safe and effective. And that's always a question I have, is if it's moving the needle this way and it's growing this, what else is going on that we're not aware of? And I think it's a slippery slope. And I see a lot of pros out there either promoting them, selling them, or taking them themselves. And it's just, maybe I'm a little bit more of a conservative approach, but it concerns me because I don't know what that story looks like down the road.
And even with that, because of the current status they're in, who's supplying it, what are in those compounds?
Yes.
Do we know what type of environment was, especially because a lot of them, there are a lot of that are injectable.
Yeah,
so
right.
Was that handled in a certain way that there's no contaminants in that fluid? So many other questions that go with that. Whereas if this was either a standardized medicine, or some people get them at a compounding pharmacy or something, that's a little different. But sure. I'd say if we just went on the website and ordered some, it's just like knowing, okay, where did that come from and what type of lab was it produced in?
I think that's some good sound advice from the both of you, because the thing about it and the thing I see is it's a newer thing, but all of a sudden, everyone who's got a gym around me, they offer peptides now. And I'm like, when did you become a doctor? You know?
Yeah.
So it's definitely out there. So I think you two offer some sound advice in terms of just being a little bit cautious. And like you said, Dr. Nick, there's other things that we can take care of first before we have to handle peptides or anything else that's new out there and maybe not as studied as we would like. So we do call ourselves the training room, and any good training session deserves a bit of a cool down. So what we like to do at the end is just give some final thoughts. And Dr. Nick, while we have you here, I was wondering if you had any final thoughts for our listeners in terms of nutrition, performance nutrition, and what it means for ultimately what we're trying to do is help our clients out.
Yeah, don't overcomplicate it. I think that would be the theme kind of this podcast, talking about nutrition. Give them a goal like, all right, I need you to get half your body weight in ounces of fluid per day. Boom. That's a measurement that we can do. You to have at least 3 colors on each of your plate every time you go to eat a meal. Just those, and I would never give them any more than 3 goals at a time. And then just go tick through them. And once they get those mastered, move on to that next level. But it's just executing the basics efficiently and consistently is what's really going to remove the needle for either you or your client.
Right.
Love that. Love that. And to me, that sounds like we could save this for another day, but you're talking about the coaching aspect of
Yeah.
nutrition, not necessarily the science aspect. So I'll just go because you stole mine. My takeaway for today is mastering the basics. And I love that because the longer I've been in this and the older I get, I love keeping things basic. I'm doing a lot of the same exercises over and over again. And in terms of my big hitters for nutrient dense foods, I eat a lot of the same things, and that keeps it really simple for me. And I am good about hydrating and getting my sleep as well. So that's my big takeaway, is just mastering the basics. Now, I think it makes sense to be in tune with what's cutting edge and emerging out there, because guess what? Your clients are going to ask you about it. So you want to make sure to at least be able to be in a place where you can speak on things professionally. But for me, it's absolutely mastering the basics. Dr. Aaron, any final thoughts on our conversation with Dr. Nick today?
Yeah, I definitely aligned with what you both said, but I also think with the emerging research piece, we have a responsibility to ask better questions. Like Nick, you highlighted, like, what's in those compounds? Where did it come from? How was it handled? Asking those deeper questions, but I think remaining curious about it and not immediately writing it off because we don't have enough information, but just approaching it in a way that's cautiously optimistic and asking better questions about what the data is saying. And just because there's been one human study doesn't mean it's generalizable or that it's going to have promising results across the board. Thinking like a scientist, and scientists always start by asking questions.
Love that. So thank you to our guest, Chief Academic Officer of Lionel University, Dr. Nick Barringer. Thank you to my co-host, Dr. Aaron Nitschke. And thank you to you listeners out there for joining us for another great training session here on The Training Room.